The last speaker will be Frank Deppe. Frank is, where did I put you down, Frank? One of these pieces, please. Retired professor of political theory and political science at the University of Marburg. Also a serious scholar activist, a member of the left, a member of the scientific board of ATTAC, and recently elected to the electing concilium for the German presidency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So there you have it, very publicly active.
It's not one of my best things I did. First of all, I would of course like to thank you for inviting me to take part in this conference. I'm very proud to be here, having the opportunity to honor Leo and his work. I might say I'm the speaker of a German or an older Marburg Leo Panic fan club. And they asked me to be here. We had a big Leo and a little Leo who is now a very important professor in Tübingen, but that's another story. You spoke of you asked when did we meet Leo for the first time. I'm sorry, I can top you. We didn't meet, but we just found out Leo signed a motion in 1971 or 1972 when there was a campaign making me a professor in Marburg, and there was international support. Ralph Miliband wrote a letter of recommendation, so we were quite close. So it took some decades when we met. That was about 20 years ago in Marburg. We had a Marxist study group there on European integration. We had just discovered, I would like to mention in Bob Cox, Neo-Gramscianism and International Relations, and Leo's article, Globalization in the State in Socialist Register of 1994, from which I would like to quote a sentence which was very important for our own approach and our work until today. We should not, quote, ignore the extent to which today's globalization both is authorized by states and is primarily about reorganizing rather than bypassing states. That was a key sentence for our work. And if we add this process within the American empire, then we come, I believe, quite close to the essence of his work in this field. Yet when we met in Marburg, we did, of course, discuss questions of socialist strategy and politics. We largely agreed upon his conviction that, as Leo wrote with Sam in the latest Socialist Register, the working class needs a party capable of transforming institutions in a socialist and democratic way. We had no problem to communicate upon this. It was our Marburg tradition connected to Wolfgang Abendroth, to the socialist tradition in the German working class movement, etc. I don't want to go into detail. We planned already in 1966, 1970 in the Socialist Students' Organization, a party, a founding of a socialist party like the PSU in Italy or the PSU in France at this time, when a party left of the social democracy. Now I remember a conversation with Leo while we were walking to his hotel. There he said, "Do you know, Frank, why we failed in the late 70s? Because we did not succeed to transform labor or social democracy into a real socialist party of the working class." Of course, Leo was referring to the British or his own experience. Hillary just spoke about this. However, I could not agree with him in this conversation because we had failed to build up a strong party left of the social democracy. Abendroth had taught us in order to strengthen even the left wing within the Social Democratic Party, there must be pressure and competition from the left, from outside. Some of you might think that this trip into history leads us directly into very actual problems of rebuilding the left in Western Europe. Though the historical, social and political conditions for the socialist project have dramatically changed within this epoch. Since the late 20th century, especially the dramatic restructuring of the working class, the new configuration of the subordinate classes and class fractions. That's another subject. As I have just arrived from Germany, you certainly might expect a comment on the results of our general elections 2 weeks ago. I will summarize very briefly a shift to the right. The winner is, or among the winners, is the Alliance for Germany. It won nearly 13%, plus 8%. The Liberal Party, which was not in parliament, won 10% and returned to parliament. The Liberal Party is a neoliberal party. Die Linke, the left party, gained 9.2%. This is, in my view, a success. And the loser is the Christian Democratic Party, with the two parts, Christian Democrats, Christian Social Party in Bavaria, 32.9 minus 8.6%, especially the CSU in Bavaria, minus 10%, most lost to the right-wing populist party. However, and the Social Democratic Party, for instance, lost in their traditional strongholds with former mining industry and steel industry in the northwest of Germany. The general result is Ms. Merkel will be Chancellor of a new coalition government without Social Democrats. The Social Democrats have already proclaimed to go into opposition. But obviously the losers are the parties in government. This has happened in many countries in the past decade. Stability of government will be more complicated in Germany, and as Germany is the leading country in the European Union, and German imperialism now is looking towards the reorganization of world politics and has a leading position in the world economy, this might be for the ruling classes in Germany an interesting point of instability, that they have to build a coalition government from 4 parties and not have this rather stable constellation of the great coalition with the Social Democrats they had in the past. But these results also indicate a very interesting and dangerous contradiction, confirmed by opinion polls. I'm thinking other countries too, but in Germany it's very, very acute. In Germany at the moment, most people are satisfied with their personal economic situation, confirmed by polls, etc. Unemployment is low compared to neighbor countries. The German economy is flourishing. That was, of course, the highly ideological message of Ms. Merkel in the campaign, in the electoral campaign. Never Germans were better off than at the moment. Yet on the other side, there is widespread discontent with government, parties, uncertainty in respect to the future, anxiety confronting crises, terrorism, refugees, anxiety confronting at least the pressure of social decline in the middle classes and the working class. The appreciation of the so-called political class has fallen down to a very low level. Political issues of security instead of social justice are pushed by conservatives, but more radically by nationalist and racist forces to the top of the political agenda. Parts of the working class which have experienced social decline or are under stress at work follow this right-wing propaganda, which, however, at the same time reflects the weakness of a radical left rooted within the working class, and even a radical left criticism of capitalism, a consciousness of class struggle in the history of the working class, which has disappeared from trade union education programs. So you don't find especially among young officials in the union, you don't find young people which have knowledge not only about what capitalism is, but what the history of working class movement in Germany, internationally, etc. is. And so we have a reflection today that officials I've spoken many times in the past year to trade union meetings about this new right populist wave, and now the successes of this Alliance for Germany, etc. And you find a very interesting point. Even among an audience where you know there will be voters for the right-wing party, there is high interest to listen to your analysis. Problems of fascism, crisis of capitalism, which produces the problems which are now reflected on the right, etc., etc. And there you find out one interesting thing. It's a world going out of joint for most people. They don't understand anymore what happens in the world. With all these different, the anxiety for their own future, crisis, and at the same time looking at television news, the world has gone crazy. And Trump, of course, is part of this going crazy, etc. And terrorism and North Korea and whatever is just, and they have nobody who explains them this situation. And we have made empirical research how workers in members of the Metal Workers Union reflect crisis. And there were interesting answers from them. Some of them said, oh, this was, of course, after the crisis of 2008. The majority said, we have crisis since 20 years. Since I am in this corporation, we always are under pressure to be competitive. We pay less, you must work more, there's more stress in work, etc. And the second answer was also interesting. The union, there was a disappointment and disapproval of parties, of any party, and the only thing they said we have is the union. But these were people of corporations with a high, of course, rate of unionization, automobile industry and industries connected to it. But they said, and at the same time they said, the union must explain to us the situation and direct us for doing something against this in the interests of the union, the working class, etc. But this, the rise of right-wing populism among working class fractions is at the same time reflects the weakness of the political left within the unions and in the political field. But I think the German results are even more disturbing. These results, the shift towards the right, which will be expressed by the role of the liberals in government, the Social Democrats are out of government. The Social Democratic participation in government meant they had a legislation on minimum wage. The liberals, neoliberals, strictly oppose it. So the Social Democrats are out of government, and the liberals are in, and they will be in the finance ministry or the economic ministry. They will have a leading position, and it will be more difficult, but at the same time we say there will be more conflict and more opportunity for resistance from part of the unions to mobilize in the political field, because they don't do that when the Social Democrats are in government. So this might be a chance in this situation, but the German results are even more disturbing, because if you take a historical perspective, the shift towards the right happens under quite favorable and still stable economic conditions. However, what might happen under the pressure of crisis? Rising unemployment and intensified conflicts and struggle connected to new waves of refugees, rising criminality, fascist propaganda. Since our Marxist analysis do not exclude forthcoming crises, economic and financial crisis, so we should be prepared to the possibility of such a sudden radicalization towards the right. In Germany, we remember the upswing of Hitler's party between 1930 and 1932. Let's have a look at the results for the Social Democratic Party. In 1922, when I was nominated professor for political science as a Marxist, Willy Brandt, his party gained nearly 46% of the suffrage. So they profited from my nomination. It declined continuously during the following elections to 35%. However, since 1998, when Schröder became Chancellor, it fell down to now 20.9%. The party membership in the same time fell from 1 million to 490,000 in 2011. A German social democracy since Schröder's neoliberal agenda 2010, and as a junior partner within the Great Coalition under Merkel, is in rapid decline. Like other social democratic parties in the Netherlands, France, Spain, PASOK, and in other countries. Why? Well, I think we have analyzed this problem always and again in the past 2 decades, and Colin Kraut's post-democracy is only one approach, and a very narrow approach, because he doesn't analyze. He only speaks of the crisis of the social democracy as a result of the dissolution of the working class and the victory of neoliberalism. But I think the decline of the Social Democratic Party in Germany is part of different processes. A structural change in the composition of the working class and the shift in the regions which have voted for social democracy, and it's part of the crisis and alienation between the party and the unions, which was a result of Schröder's policy, and the party apparatus and the positions of the party in governments. It's a state. The leading parties in Germany are in advanced capitalist countries are of course transformed into elements and parts of the state apparatuses. And in Germany, the financing parties, even the left party, by their foundations, etc., is a strong instrument of putting the parties, or getting them, making a state apparatuses of the parties. And the party's apparatuses has transformed and been occupied by middle-class academics with no intellectual and emotional ties with the life and working conditions of the common people. That was since the 80s. I have to come to the 80s because I wanted to ask now for the perspective within and beyond social democracy. That's within social democracy. That's very short now. We can't see at the moment any perspective for comparable to the Labour Party, or there's no Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, etc. in the German social democracy. The last candidate for such a role was Oscar Lafontaine, but he left the party 10 years ago and joined the left. He didn't succeed in the left, but his wife, Sarah Wagenknecht, is a very popular figure in German politics and in the media, etc., and she shares positions of Oscar, etc. Well, there's no perspective. There's no relevant group of left-wing trade unionists, the Metal Workers Union, which might play a role of radicalizing social democratic policies in the field of economic policy and social policies. Yes, beyond the party, the Linke, my subject for very complicated. It's full of contradictions. It's a success. They reached nearly 10%. Never before, I'm quite old in the history of West Germany and the Federal Republic, a party left from the social democracy got beyond the 5%. Only in the first parliament after 1949 there was a communist party which was thrown out in the first election in 1953. So in the party it's full of contradictions. There is one parliamentary section, strongly bound to elections, parliamentary work, coalition building. And then on the other side, you have a quite strong tendency which tries to connect the rebuilding, it's my position, the rebuilding of the left socialist party to the social movements and to the left wing of the trade unions in Germany. And we said this is more important to build up this party as a project of new socialism than being focused upon the question, will we be in the next government? Our government is two governments now with the left in it, in Berlin and in Thüringen, with a prime minister in Thüringen from the left, Bodo Ramelow, a good friend of mine. But Bodo, they will lose the next election, and they will be reduced by the laws in which they have to follow when they get into this position. But this is still an open conflict in the party, because one very important result of the elections is the party was strong in the East, and you know we have this basic problem in this party of the German history and the unification of East Germany and the West. And the party was strong in East Germany because it came out of the state party of the GDR. And in the first years of the election, the party had nearly 25-30% in East Germany, and it was quite weak in the West, never got the 5% in the West. This has changed, and this tendency to a change is really stressed by the results of these elections. They lost a lot in the East by floating votes to the AfD, to the right wing, protest votes. At the same time, the party members and voters in the East have a higher mortality rate than in other parts of Germany. It's the history, in the political history of the GDR. And in the West, the party has, on the average, got results, I come to the end, above 5%. My hometown, Marburg, we had 60%, and our candidate had 12%, a young woman, which is quite excellent. So there is a shift from the old electorate to new, younger people. The analysis show this quite early in university towns more than in the countryside, where the party is still very weak. But the problem is, this is good, but the problem is the party is not rooted in the working class. It's not rooted in the working class, and I in the party, for instance, try to open their minds that they must be strong in the unions, strengthen the left wing of the unions, and have their activists within the work, and then form coalitions with social movements and also parts of the social democracy. If I would have more time, I could go a bit further into these last points, but this might be a perspective. Not now in Germany, we have, of course, the first thing we have to do is fight against the right-wing tendency in Germany and build coalitions against fascism and neo-fascism in Germany. We have so many attacks against refugee homes, etc. Hundreds of people have been killed in Germany in the past 10 years because they had the wrong color of their skin. So this is an imminent danger, and we know that more than 20% of the German population is quite close to reactionary and pro-fascist ideology, etc. So this is a very important task we have to fulfill. But beyond this, we have to reconstruct a perspective of socialist transformation in the context of these kinds of building the party from below, even local projects where you can, the question of recommunalization and stop privatization, etc., concrete projects at the local level. And I think this might be a perspective where at least we can strengthen the left in Germany beyond social democracy. Thank you very much.